a.m. We are talking to our friends from Incarcerated Workers Organizing Committee. Is that right? Or
yes.
Incarcerated Workers. Sean in studio, and he's told me that we have a guest on the phone. We changed guests, so we have Matthew Emerson on the line. If you want to introduce Matthew and their role in Incarcerated Workers.
Well, Matthew and I have only just met.
Hi.
And
we're all meeting each other at the same time?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
But I think he can most likely do a far better job of introducing himself than I can.
Well, Matthew, tell us a little bit about the work you do with Incarcerated Workers.
Oh, sure. Yeah, so I've been directing content strategy for about 6 years for the Incarcerated Workers Organizing Committee up here in Twin Cities. Definitely navigated a few challenges back in 2020 and beyond. Let's see, myself personally, organizing actions against the system and just bringing voice to the people that need change in their lives and aren't able to voice that concern themselves, really.
And Sean, let me ask you first, because we talked a little bit before we started, and you grew up in Aurora. Yeah. What led you to want to fight for the rights of incarcerated, and in particular when it comes to prison labor and prison slavery, really?
Well, when I was 8 or so, they taught us about chattel slavery, and I told myself as an 8-year-old, if something like this ever happened, I would never let this happen. And now that I'm older, I realize it is happening. It's continuing to happen. And so here I am.
And it's a long-standing history of this practice. I have a friend who wrote a book. I'm trying to pick up the. My friend Henry Kamerling wrote a book about the post-Civil War chain gangs, and we've seen these in movies and things like that. But Matthew, tell us a little bit about how you got involved and what people should know about incarcerated workers.
Oh, I love that question. So I was incarcerated for 3 years. I was sentenced to 9.5 years for a drug crime. And then through that process, I ended up being released through early release 3 years early. I did a total of 3 years. And so in that process, inside prison, I came in with 12 college credits. I came out with 87. I facilitated 114 father support groups. And got really connected to administration and understanding from the inside, like how can we really do things positively for prisoners. And through that work, there was a prison administrator who was a prisoner who helped administrate inside prison for 22 years. He connected me with some of our colleagues at Twin Cities IWOC, and so I walked in there and was like, how can I help? And they were like, we want to change the system. And so that's how I got involved, really.
Wow, it is quite the experience, because I think that people have this idea that the people if you've done the crime do the time and you deserve it. There is that attitude, isn't there, Matthew?
Yeah, and I mean that couldn't be any more farther from the truth. I mean, if you look at the population, it's a tragedy. If you've never had a family member incarcerated or a loved one. You just don't know. And then even to take it a step further, if you're a loved one of somebody that's incarcerated, you just don't know about how challenging it is to be stuck in a steel cage or inside a cinder block 4x8 square for extended periods of time. I mean, it's horrible. And so it's just such a privilege to connect with folks like Sean and our folks up in Minneapolis, just to bring voices. I think about, we had this, during COVID, they switched the diabetes medication instead of 3 shots a day down to 2 large ones.
Oh, my God.
And it was causing medical issues inside the facility.
Right.
And so we got a hold of the administration, and they were like, well, we had no idea about this. And so we got the problem solved, and it was just amazing to have a group of people on the outside that care about prisoners to come in and advocate for simple changes like that. But then on top of that, the larger scale changes at the same time, which is, hey, there's a part of the Constitution that still permits slavery. Like, how do we not know about this until we go to jail? We're like, wait, I'm a slave now?
Yeah,
that's literally what it is.
Yeah, Sean, I don't know. Did you know this before you started doing this work, that the 13th Amendment, while we all know that it abolished slavery, unless it's a punishment for a crime, did you know that prior to your work with incarcerated workers?
I did, yeah. I had been organizing for a few years before I started doing prisoner solidarity work. So I was around a lot of people who had been incarcerated, so I knew a few things about the system, and I knew, I can't remember whose quote this is, so I don't want to misattribute it, but someone said, you can tell a lot about the state of a country by the way that it treats its prisoners.
Okay.
And prisoners are the most isolated people in this, probably on the planet, and not by choice at all. And I don't want to speak to other places, but in Illinois, at least, the amount of medical neglect that these people are facing is it's torture, number one, and it's deadly. Even treatment for cancer, they will delay this. We have one member who found out about 2 years ago that he had stage 4 cancer, and he has not had any treatment yet.
That's horrifying. Well,
Yeah.
and Matthew, the thing is that, the intention, or what I think, people, you throw around the word like rehabilitation. I don't know how you break somebody down and demoralize them, take advantage of them, make money off their backs, and expect anyone to come out and go, okay, I'm a better person. Like, I'd be angry when I came out. I don't know how it's so rehabilitative.
Yeah. Unless if you fall into a Stockholm syndrome, that's pretty much the outcome every time.
Wow. Yeah. I would imagine that.
I think Matthew's, your ability to get college credits, I mean, that's exceptional. Most people do not have that opportunity at all when they're incarcerated. And in fact, people who are severely mentally ill inside of, Illinois prisons, most of them are sent to Dixon Correctional Center, and they're put into the X House. And this is a prison that was constructed in like early 1900s, and the staff and the entire Department of Corrections has known this entire time that they don't have the capacity to treat any of these people, and these are the most mentally ill prisoners, male prisoners, in the state, and yet they are in their cells for 23 and a half hours a day. Most of them have not seen the sunlight, and they don't see the sunlight. They went 6 months at one point without being let out to yard. And when they are let out to the yard, they're let out in these cages that have open tops. They're the size of porta potties.
Wow.
And they cannot use the bathroom. They cannot get a drink. There is so much like goose feces on the ground that they cannot sit down.
Wow.
And they are given no objects. They don't have anything to read. They cannot bring writing materials. And so, again, these are people who are the most severely mentally ill, getting zero treatment, only torture. And so horrible things start happening. The only means of communication is physical, and sometimes feces is thrown, urine is thrown. So why in the world would anyone want to go outside?
Right.
You wouldn't.
No.
So now you have health issues because you don't get any sunlight. But do you think that they're checking for the vitamin D levels of these prisoners? They're not.
Matthew, how much of a I don't even know how to put this, because it seems daunting to take on this system and the way things are, but it has to be done. So I guess the question is that, first of all, what can we do to help?
Well, so that's exactly what I was thinking as I was listening to Sean. So the Incarcerated Workers Organizing Committee is a great place to land, because we're a group of community members that discuss just these issues exactly, and then find ways to appropriately share them with the community. Whether that's like, hey, we need to call the warden today and we need to tell him to end this now. Or whether that's, we've called the warden, we've called everybody, nobody's listening. Let's get out in the streets and let's let's go for a walk in front of the governor's mansion and hold a press conference. I mean, these are super simple things that people in the community can involve themselves in that can bring about real change. Because a lot of times, if nobody notices that something is happening, nobody does anything about it. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm a part of the Incarcerated Workers Organizing Committee today.
Again, we're talking to Matthew Emerson, and we're talking to Matthew Emerson and Sean Walker of Incarcerated Workers Committee, and we invite you to go to incarceratedworkers.org to learn more, because this is we mentioned that, Sean, that there are corporations that are making money off of prisoners' backs. I didn't realize the extent to which, high tech, whether it's Sprint, Verizon, having folks work, and are they given any sort of resources in exchange for this, or just
I think just a few pennies on the dollar, and I'm not sure if they're getting any good time back for doing this, because
it's still in the 13th Amendment. So there's nothing. It sounds as though this is something that has to change in our Constitution as well, right, Matthew?
Well, yeah. I mean, I would love to wave a wand and change the Constitution tomorrow. Here I am. I mean, I haven't committed a crime in over 10 years. I haven't been incarcerated in over 6 years. But yet still technically, in the federal government's eyes, I'm a slave. I can't have life insurance. There's so many things that I'm limited to by my lived experience. And there's no qualified class. I can't qualify for 55-plus housing. There's many things, which is why I personally, have used education and things like that to get to the level where I can ask the system for a pardon. But I have to go that far, which is insane, right? Who even knows what a pardon is or how to do it, right? But I have to go that far to regain my basic constitutional rights after I've committed a crime 10 years ago that was a non-violent offense. And it's just such a hard life in some ways through that lens.
Folks, you can join this organization, incarceratedworkers.org. There's a way to become a member if you know. And here's the thing: you don't have to be. I know there are folks who shut down emotionally and go, "It's not my problem." It affects everybody, guys. It affects everybody because when we talk about what's going on in our communities, what does it mean to be able to rehabilitate or to have the way we deliver justice? I've talked about this a lot before. I'm against the death penalty, and as somebody who is a homicide survivor, I didn't even know that was a phrase that was until a few years ago. My brother was murdered, and his murderer was executed, and it didn't change anything in my family's life. It is, and that's why I found myself getting into arguments with people I've known for a long time when they would just assume that people who have done their time basically disappear. They don't want you to be a part of society again, and that makes me absolutely crazy. What's the point then?
Yeah, I don't think prisons should even exist at all. I think that it's only been around for 200 years, prisons, and it was a reform to begin with, from not just murdering people. And there are just so many other ways that we can, rehabilitate and find justice and find reconciliation that don't involve severe psychological torture and imprisonment and punishment. Treatment.
And there's treatment too, because so much of it is mental illness. If some folks know, I to this day believe that had my brother's murderer been treated better as a child or anywhere along his life, that's what we talk about here in Chicago. It's like if you starve people from options, they will choose a different economy for themselves or a different way of functioning in the society. Let me take a break. Matthew, do you mind holding on? Sean, do you mind hanging out for a break while we come back and continue our conversation? Sound good, Matthew?
Yeah.
I got a nod from Sean in the studio. So more after this, folks. If you want to join the conversation, if you have any questions or comments, 773-763-9278. That's the number to call, or text and join the conversation. More in a moment on WCPT 820 Heartland Signal and KTNF in Minneapolis, St. Paul, 9:50 a.m. More after this. I am in studio with our friend from one of our friends from from incarcerated workers. You can go to incarceratedworkers.org. In studio, we have Sean Walker, and on the line we have Matthew Emerson. You're in Minnesota, Sean, Matt?
Yes.
And so what reaction do you get from folks? I mean, this is something where I imagine there are a lot of folks like Sean who maybe at a young age it spoke to them. And Sean is clearly somebody who is active in organizing and drawing attention to important issues. This is something that you, as someone who's been incarcerated, have the lived experience of. What is it like for you when you talk to folks who, what kind of outreach do you have with people who maybe don't have a personal experience with incarceration?
Well, I walk up to every single one of them the same way I'd walk up to either one of you guys, gals or guys. And I just try and be human with them. And it goes a long way. I've worked with, religious leaders of many different faith backgrounds. I've worked with a lot of grandmas. A lot of it is education. I mean, the most common person that's never heard of jail before is the mom or the grandma that's asking me about their kid on their way out of prison. And so it's really easy to just kind of provide facts that will kind of help them through their journey. So that's like my most common communication. But talking to people on the street, a lot of it has to do with like morals and values and how you want to really impact the world. I love our organization's abolition spirit because it's a shared value, right? Like everyone needs to be free. It's very simple. We shouldn't be having wars. We're as a nation, as a globe, like we're smart enough to not do this stuff anymore. Conflict resolution gets so much farther than a day in jail. It's unbelievable. So anyway,
you hit the nail on the head for me. We're smarter than this. Sean and I are in studio nodding, because so much is cloaked in religion and using that as a reason. Like, well, the Bible says this and the Bible says that. And it's like, if that's what the Bible says to you.
That reminds me. That reminds me of the parole board director I called in Alabama. Or no, in Atlanta, Georgia, and he goes, "Well, down here all of our laws are based off the 7 deadly sins," and I'm like, "There's more religions than just one in America." Respectfully,
yes.
And the 7 deadly sins are not in the Bible.
Oh, I'm gonna say I don't know the Bible.
Not even in the Bible.
That's interesting.
So hold on a second. Now I need to find the source for the 7 deadly sins. But that is, yeah, and that's so much. I think that's where I come from. Is that we're smarter than this, than what we're doing to harm people, for people who believe in freedoms, and I just it's not very Christ-like if people use the Bible that way or whatever belief system that you are operating on. It's a lot to take on, isn't it, Sean?
I mean, I thought Christ was supposed to liberate the dead. That was his whole goal as a human being, was for him to free the people in hell.
Right.
So if you want to be Christ-like, be a prison abolitionist.
There you go. Boom.
So true.
Sean just dropped his mic. He's like, there it is.
No, but really, I mean, we've been humans for 100,000 years? And it's only in the past maybe 20,000 that we've started believing that humans are inherently evil or something. But before that, we were living in harmony with the earth.
I don't know about that. I mean, I've been to Mexico City and they use skulls as part of the building. I mean, what I'm saying is we have always found ways to hurt each other. We have always found ways to hurt each other. We've always
hurt each other, but
no,
it's
but
not an inherent.
It's the state-driven form that we're talking about. Like
sure,
and I think Matthew, you were mentioning, unless you have Stockholm syndrome as far as your experience in prison, as to how you weather it. I think they've done studies on this, how people fall into this sort of psychological, like if they play as prisoners or as they play as guards, how much more as guards they really think that they have the right to treat people badly. I don't know if you've seen any of that, Matthew.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that just it triggers a lot of problematic diversity-related issues from my lived experience.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, the reaction. I don't know. I mean, when we're talking through an anthropological lens, I definitely can support that perspective of like, oh, if I have a suit on and I can tell people what to do, I need to tell people what to do.
Right.
And it has a lot to do with It has a lot to do with the marketing, whether you're marketing somebody into the uniform or into the prison jumpsuit, yeah.
I feel like I need to have a conversation. I need to invite you both back on again because I have a friend who's a former prison guard who has a really fascinating perspective and is very, honest about how horrible it is for inmates. And I have friends who've worked, I know that on the website for incarcerated workers, you can go to incarceratedworkers.org. One of the big things, obviously, we drove down for the protests at Cook County when they weren't allowing people during COVID-19 to have access to just safety in general. Mm-hmm. And prison guards were dying from COVID-19 because there was a lack of no urgency for making sure that people who were at 26 in California were safe.
I mean, yeah, it's still nothing really changed, unfortunately. Everything just kind of kept on going in the same horrible way that it was.
Matthew, what do you see as far as the most effective ways for us to communicate? I mean, I know that you mentioned that you work with religious leaders. I guess having these conversations and just, I think, elevating this. We have a friend named Todd Belcour who works with expunging records and things like that. What else? What are some of the most effective things that you've, aside, in addition to telling your personal story, what seems to resonate with people?
Well, resonation. So one is solutions. So like yes. I focus mainly on solution-driven answers to this crisis. I think of like, well, there is a system. I don't believe no matter how much we try and just tear the whole thing down and start over immediately, I don't believe that that's going to happen. And so I try and find specific areas that are important, and I try and work in those silos the best that we can to create as much change as possible. And so as we look at this, I think an example is like, for example, we can really take the prison system and make it something that is much more communal rather than like a single family owning every vending machine in the state of Illinois and profiting off of it. Yeah. Why don't we look at like a more statewide communal way to change that process, right? And a lot of them are founded in a good old boy nihilist or nepotism system, and those structures are really what I've been looking at and identifying how can we change this. And at the same time, I've been looking towards reentry and recidivism. And recidivism is like reducing the percentage of people that would go back to jail after they've gotten out. That's where I focus most of my work these days. And I find that if they have somebody like myself in their corner that's going to be honest with them about what they need to start over in life, those things really can lead to people not getting left behind, left to go back to previous behaviors. Right. And that's a really important concept as we're looking at, how to address these things beyond our organizing, which is bringing a voice of change to things that we see that are problems.
Well, I'm grateful for your insight, and I look forward to having you both on again. I have to close out the show. Sean Walker and Matthew Emerson from Incarcerated Workers. Go to incarceratedworkers.org. And the book I mentioned is Capital and Convict, Race, Region, and Punishment in Post-Civil War America by Henry Kamerling. If it's something you want, I could bring a copy next time with an autograph maybe even. Thank you so much, Matthew. Thank you so much, Sean. It was great talking to you and learning more about this, and we look forward to connecting again.
Yes, please.
Thank you so much. Mike Kreutz up next with Devil's Advocate. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Andy, for keeping the show running. Good night, everybody. Have a great evening.